Little 500 success had come recently with the pole position in 1971. Unlike Delta Chi, Kappa Sigma was a large, well-known Greek house with over 100 members. In 1972, they were led by a pair of young riders, Bob Shantio and Bob Kirkwood, childhood friends from Logansport, Indiana.
Bob Shantio, without question, is responsible for my personal success in Little 500. He pushed me to do things I didn't believe I ever could have done.
The stage was set for an amazing showdown. Delta Chi drew first blood at qualifications. On a day with blizzard conditions, they took the pole, with Eddie turning in the fastest lap of the day.
I've talked to Van Gys before the race. He was telling me he's in the best shape of his life. I just felt there was a certain cockiness and arrogance, not arrogance, cockiness and overconfidence there.
We knew that we had a very powerful team that year, and we fully intended to use the depth of the team to our advantage.
3 weeks later, on April 29, 1972, Eddie Van Gys and the Delta Chis led out the field as the 22nd Little 500 began.
It was just awesome. It was amazing. That stadium is loud. Anybody that's ever ridden and started on the bike and you glance by your pit, go by there, and I mean, they are just going crazy before that event. I don't think there's any build-up. I've never experienced in any cycling event a build-up like those first few laps before the start of the Little 500. We had a plan that you'll separate the men from the boys after 100 laps.
They never got the chance. With the pre-race favorites still on the lead lap, the light drizzle, which had been consistent all day, turned to a downpour, and in an unprecedented action, the steering committee red-flagged the race, immediately suspending the event at lap 77 until the following day.
I don't think we were at the hotel more than 1 hour, and I get sick. And I start throwing up, and I have diarrhea, and it lasted all night. I didn't sleep 10 minutes all night. And I woke up the next day as the weakest individual. I had the shakes. I was pale as a ghost. It was really a terrible predicament to be in. The strongest team does no longer have 200 laps to wear down the opposition. You've got just about half a race left to go to work on these guys. And guess what? One of our big hammers right here, Eddie, is not going to be the guy we're going to start with on the bike.
At the end of the first day, there was no clear leader. So on the second day, race officials decided to take all 15 teams that were on the lead lap and line them up single file for a flying start. Lots were drawn for position in the line. Despite a furious attack by Bob Kirkwood and the Cap Sigs, the depleted Delta Chis managed to keep them in check until the final laps.
At lap 196 or 7, I was still on the bike, and I was going to make an exchange. Eddie Van Gys was out there with me, and I looked, it was right next to me, and said, "Well, good luck, Eddie," to him. And he makes an exchange, and I'm just flabbergasted because I thought Ed was her best sprinter.
Unable to sustain the pace of a final sprint, Van Gys exchanged to Dayton. Kirkwood stayed on the bike.
My strategy was not to lead out the lap, but to be back a bike or two and then slingshot past them going into the first turn.
As Kirkwood began his attack from the front of the pack, a surprised Steve Dayton, riding in yellow, came from the back.
All of a sudden, on this footage, you see Steve. He must be in 14th position when his eyes get this big and sees a white flag.
Steve had the habit of riding in the back of the pack, and that was a tactical error on his part, tactical error on Delta Chi's part.
In a surprising bit of irony, despite the information system that the Delta Chis were developing, Dayton was unaware of the lap count until he saw the white flag.
Bob Kirkwood had attacked at a beautiful moment, and Steve made up, went around everybody, just missed getting Bob Kirkwood. So Kappa Sig, they were champions, and we were second place.
We went out and we proved that we were as good or better than you know, the people coming in and invading the race, if you will. I think there was also, though, just a sense of accomplishment that you know you can accomplish anything just by the fact that you managed to best something that seemed kind of insurmountable.
Delta Chi would have to wait another year. But Eddie Van Gys, one of the quickest and most charismatic cyclists to attend IU, would leave without a victory.
You know, that's the most disappointing thing in my entire cycling career. Nothing has hurt me here as much as that.
At the time when we finished the race and we didn't win, it just seemed like there was no justice in the world. You know, we really felt like we had prepared well, we had done everything right, and we didn't win the race, and it was devastating. It was just devastating.
Vitality shows not only in the ability to persist, but the ability to start over. F. Scott Fitzgerald.
I was at a point where I had decided I wasn't leaving that school until we won the race. So first thing that meant was I was going to be back at school another year.
What it also meant was they needed to find a new leader for their depleted team. Wayne Stetina was the answer.
My father was a champion cyclist, and my family was very supportive. I was the oldest of 4 brothers, and all my younger brothers raced.
In 1972, while Eddie and the Delta Chis were busy on the track, Stetina, a high school senior, was training to race in Munich, Germany in the first of his 4 Olympics.
And we'd asked him to come visit the house, and we were sitting in a football game, and it was announced that Wayne Stetina was coming to Indiana University, returning from the Olympics, and he was going to ride Little 500 for Delta Chi fraternity. And that was the first we'd heard of it.
Little 5 is a very interesting event because once you get people really tired, you get a new rider on the bike. And so it's not like the racing I'm used to when you crack somebody, they're done and that's it, and you don't see them again for the rest of the day.
You know, Wayne's attitude was, well, how long is this race? 50 miles? Okay, well, I'll ride it, you know, myself. And we knew that that wouldn't work, first of all. And we knew that Wayne had to learn how to work with a team, secondly. And we knew that Wayne had to think about this race differently than any race that he'd ever ridden in before.
Despite Stetina's prowess on the bike, the Delta Chis weren't viewed as a serious threat. With only one veteran, they qualified 5th, behind pole sitter Dodd's House and defending champion Kappa Sigma, who, by returning their best riders Shantio and Kirkwood, were the decided favorites.
We were maybe like the Delta Chis were the year before. We were a little overconfident. And there was this guy named Wayne Stetina who was on the other team, but he was one guy. The rest of the team was gone.
I rode the first roughly 60 laps of the race. One reason I stayed on the bike so long is that there were a fair amount of crashes.
When he got on for his second set, he had to catch the pack, and he did that on the first lap. But as he was working his way through the pack, a wreck happened in front of him, and he did a somersault over the front of his bike.
Wayne gets back on the bike, and he catches him single-handedly. And it was a long way down. It was probably almost 3/4 of a lap.
All the racing that I'd seen Wayne do, I'd never seen him suffer so much, be in so much pain. I mean, he looked like he died. Some of the guys in the pits next to us walked down and said, if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I would never have believed it, you know, because it was just a superhuman effort.
Having personally logged 143 laps, Wayne Stetina, wheel-to-wheel with Bob Shantio, approached the finish.
He was supposed to be the veteran, and he'd raced Little 5 a lot, but I'd raced so many more bike races, it was fairly simple for me just to isolate him against the curb and then just ride fast enough to make sure that nobody else passed me.
Wayne's in the lead. Shantio's right on his tail. And Bob's strategy is, I'm going to slipstream him either on the back stretch or coming out of turn 4 into the finish line and pass him.
We coasted around the turn. He couldn't accelerate fast enough to catch me at the line, so I won by a bike length.
It was huge elation. It was really a great feeling. I mean, here's something that we set a goal for, we worked for it, we methodically aimed at this, and we accomplished it. And there was just, you know, I was just very elated. It was incredible.
In the spring of 1974, Delta Chi looked stronger than ever. With the addition of Gary Rybar and Mike Alexander, they qualified 2nd, without Stetina.
One of the things we did in '74 was we planted a rumor on campus that Wayne wasn't going to ride. And we kept him off the track until a week before the race. And when he showed up for practice one day, a few days before the race, you could see jaws dropping all around the track.
It's all psychology, every bit of it. We had dozens of tricks that we were pulling all the time that were psychology driven. The kind of shirts we wore, the way we dressed, the places we showed up, when we showed up, how we showed up, it was all about teaching the other teams that they were racing for second place. That first place was already spoken for.
In 1974, the plan was to finish second for Kappa Sigma. There's no other way to put it. It was just facing reality.
Starting out the race in the middle of the first row, Delta Chi stayed in the lead pack early.
We went out there with the intention of going for a lap around 70 or 75. It worked just the way we had diagrammed it. So by lap 100, we were a lap up, and we still had half a race to go, so we decided, let's see if we can do it again.
Their second victory in a row secure, Delta Chi would soon face the prospect of winning without Stetina. Just as it had done in the past, in 1975, the Student Foundation reconstituted the Dave Blaze rule and prohibited riders from racing in top amateur races between March 1st and race day. Once again, the best rider on the track had been eliminated.
He had provided a lot. He was a key man for our younger people to train with, and he provided us with our first win. I mean, so what more can you ask of a person?
Due to Delta Chi's practice of recruiting riders, secretive training methods, and an enviable winning streak, by 1975, the team had begun to take on the role of villain as well as perennial favorite.
In terms of having a team that's been built by recruiting and so forth, I think that, at least in my eyes, that made me train all that much harder, and I just looked at them as having like a bullseye on them.
Delta Chi took the pole position and were prohibitive favorites entering the 25th anniversary race. Their chances, however, for a third consecutive victory were dashed on lap 47 when the team was handed an unusually harsh 10-second penalty for improving their position under a yellow light, better known as creeping. Seizing the opportunity, the Fiji team quickly attacked and gained a three-quarter lap advantage. For the remainder of the race, they kept Delta Chi at bay by following them out on each exchange and winning easily.
It did take us by surprise that the Fiji team was so well coached that they knew what to do. They knew how to take advantage of that situation.
Losses hurt, and especially, I mean, a lot of the teams had the objective to finish in the top 5 or the top 10 or whatever. You know, we never had that objective. There were only two outcomes to the race for us. You either won or you didn't win.
In 1976, the two top teams on the track were, once again, Delta Chi and Fiji.
A little 500 race strategy is a lot like a chess game. You have an opening, you have a middle game, you have an end game. And if you play the opening well enough, you can dictate the outcome at the beginning of the race. And the 76 race was an example of that, when we essentially took out the Fiji team on their first set.
Predicting that the Fijis would again try to gain an advantage by working off Delta Chi exchanges, the Reisingers started Gary Rybar on the bike and told him not to exchange until one lap after Fiji's Jay Allert. The duel went on for 65 laps until an exhausted Allert exchanged first. In the end, the deeper Delta Chi team was able to keep Mark Dayton fresh for the final sprint, and he won easily. The 1977 race again saw Delta Chi riding with the leaders for most of the day, as Rybar held off the Phi Psis in record time, eclipsing the previous mark set by the Stetina-led 1974 team. Again, Delta Chi had notched back-to-back wins, and now claimed 4 of the last 5 races. With so much success behind them, it seemed that only the graduation of Rybar, Alexander, and Jeff Paulum could threaten the Delta Chi dynasty when none of their riders returned for the 1978 race.
Enrico Giamande spends 8 hours a day training to be the finest racer in all of Italy. But Enrico has a problem. He's not in Italy. He's in Bloomington, Indiana.
Papa! Ciao, Papa!
And he's not Enrico Giamande.
I should have hit him when I had the chance. He'd be dead now. Oh, grazie, Tante Santa Maria.
He's Dave Stoller.
He was as normal as pumpkin pie, and now look at him.
In 1961, as Phi-Psi phenom Dave Blaze was preparing for his historic victory, he happened upon freshman Steve Tesich struggling up a hill. Blaze easily caught and passed him, all while belting out Italian arias. Introductions were made, and a friendship began, which would personally and professionally affect both men for the rest of their lives. The Hungarian-born Tesich was so enthralled with the eccentric Blaze and how this quirky southern Indiana race had affected him so deeply that when he moved to New York after graduation, he wrote his first screenplay, entitled The Eagle of Naptown, based on Blaze's life. After a fortuitous meeting with acclaimed film director Peter Yates, the two began to collaborate on Bambino, a project about an Italian-obsessed cyclist living in a small town.
He was as much interested in trying to deal with the dynamics of growing up, the problems that face youth eternally. I think he was very much aware of the struggles, for example, that I had had with myself, and had gone and conquered them in the way that we had. It's as much about the struggles of going from youth to adulthood and how one overcomes all those insecurities as it is about a bike race or a little 500 event.
The hell with them.
What, are you afraid?
Yeah. A little bit.
Character of Dave Stoller, who in the earlier scripts used to be called Dave Blaze, by the way, is a loner. Yes, I think he's somebody who follows his fantasy, follows his dream, and then gets through and comes out the other side, and comes out at the end of the period that we show in the film as a more mature and hopefully a happier person.
In 1978, Yates and Tesich successfully pitched Bambino to 20th Century Fox and headed to Bloomington to convince the university.
The first contact I had with Steve Tesich after we graduated was one day when Bill Armstrong said Steve was coming to sing. And this was near the end of April or the 1st of May, and Steve came in with Peter Yates to see Bill Armstrong and tell him that they were going to do a movie about the Little 500. So in the fall of that year, in September, using the prior spring's riders, the race was recreated. While that was taking place, the entire movie was filmed in Bloomington, Indiana.
Yates brought a cast of relative newcomers to the film: Dennis Quaid, Jackie Earle Haley, Daniel Stern, and Robin Douglas would support Dennis Christopher, who in his first lead role would shine as the young Dave Stoller. Rounding out the cast were veteran actors Paul Dooley and Barbara Barry, who, as Stoller's parents, would perfectly enchant throughout the film.
What are we gonna do about it?
I don't know, dear. We could always strangle him while he's asleep.
20th Century Fox presents Breaking Away, the story of 4 guys in imminent danger of turning 20.
In addition to the lead roles, Yates utilized many of the 1978 race participants as extras throughout the film. Gary Rybar would play Christopher's double, and as Cinzano team member and Italian villain, he cast Little 500 alum and superstar cyclist Eddie Van Gys.
I go up to Peter Yates the day before. I go, Peter, we're all wondering, do you know who's going to play the villain Italian cyclist from the 4 of us? And I was hoping he'd say right away, you, Eddie. Instead, he goes, no. He goes, I'm going to have you ride by tomorrow when you put on your outfits. I'm just going to have you look at me. I'll look at your eyes and look at your face. So sure enough, the next day, he had us ride by. He said, guys, put your hands in the drops, ride by, look up. And he said, Eddie, you're my villain. I like your eyes, you're my villain. So I'm not known for bedroom eyes. Beady eyes maybe, but not bedroom eyes.
The medium-budget production would last 12 weeks and would be shot entirely in Bloomington, utilizing many campus and city locations. 9 months later, the world premiere of the renamed Breaking Away would be held in the University Auditorium on April 21, 1979, following the running of the 29th annual race.
I mean, I think there comes a time in all our lives when we have the opportunity to either break away or not break away, and hopefully this film will encourage people to see that this problem faces many of us and to have the courage to break away themselves.
The fact that I spent 4 years here and come back here in this fashion, it obviously puts it in a whole different light. You know, to return to make a film about this place is just very special.
Despite IU's student newspaper declaring the film trivial, Breaking Away went on to become one of the most critical and successful films of 1979. Yates was nominated for an Oscar in the Best Picture and Best Director categories, while Barbara Barry was nominated as Best Supporting Actress. But the highlight of Oscar night was when Indiana University alum Steve Tessich climbed the stage to take his Oscar for the Best Screenplay of 1979. The charming story of Dave Blaze, Bloomington, and the Little 500 had achieved immortality and was recognized throughout the world as a magical film, remaining just as significant over 20 years after its release. The film had an immediate impact on Bloomington. Tourism rose dramatically for the next several years as attendance at the race skyrocketed. National media attention was at its highest. In 1981, the New York Times published a front-page article about the event, and in 1982, CBS televised the race. People were driving from all over the Midwest to attend and watch the dramatic race which had inspired the award-winning film. The early 80s would also witness the passing of one of the most sacred elements of the weekend. The 10th Street Stadium, which had housed the first 30 races and was now being used exclusively for the Little 500, would be razed due to its decaying structure.
The old stadium there was like the stadium where the gladiators, whenever I would go race, I thought it was, you're a gladiator going to do battle over here.
The 10th Street Stadium had been basically condemned. It could no longer be used for a bike race, and the thought of not having the Little 500 was just not acceptable. So there had to be a stadium built.
In Army's last major contribution to the university and the race that he loved and nurtured from its infancy, he negotiated for financing and oversaw the construction of a new stadium. It would be used for the nationally recognized soccer program, as well as guarantee a home for the race for years to come.
The perfect marriage was the Little 5 and the soccer, and both found a home at Bill Armstrong Stadium.
In 1983, Army watched his last race as the leader of the Indiana Foundation. Pledging to remain active for the rest of his days, Army retired at the end of that year. In a tribute befitting to the man who had added so much to so many people's lives, the new stadium was named in his honor.
It was only appropriate that it be named the Bill Armstrong Stadium. There was nothing else that should have been considered, and I don't think it was. Well, in '78, we had an all-rookie team, and we had some talented riders on there, and they thought they were training hard, but they weren't training hard enough.
And they thought they were just going to blow this race away. They were just so excited about it and so forth, especially Bill, and lost. Lost big.
We'd crashed twice. We had bungled an exchange badly. We weren't as ready as we thought we would be. We just figured Delta Chi, we go to the track, we win, and it didn't happen.
As inexperienced Delta Chi struggled to the fraternity's worst finish since 1969, Phi Psi Doug Moody beat Sigma Nu and Alpha Epsilon Pi to the line for victory. For Phi Psi, the win was the House's 7th, the most of any team to date.
We learned so much in that 10th place finish, and it really set us up for the next 3 years.
While the rest of the Little 500 community rejoiced in Delta Chi's poor showing, the team characteristically looked at the 1978 failure as a challenge.
It didn't get to any kind of an emotional level like anger. It just was disappointment. And to me, seeing Randy and Steve disappointed was as motivational as anything else in getting us on track for the next year.
I remember we had a meeting the day after the race and Randy and I sat down and we explained to them exactly what they needed to do between now and the following year if they were going to win.
The next year we were riding in the snow. I remember putting on a pair of cotton socks and then a baggie, then a pair of wool socks and another baggie and then boots.
We put in so many miles. We rode in weather that other people wouldn't have ridden in. I remember Paul Berg coming over to my house one time to look at a bike of mine, and it was filthy, covered with dirt. And he had the sweetest Raleigh Pro 753 tubing, full campy, nice bike. And he looked at mine and he said, "Man, I would never let my bike get that dirty." And I went, "All right. The 5-size aren't riding in the weather we're riding in. We got a chance."
By the time the track opened in 1979, we had something like 4,000 miles in for the year from January on, and we were very dominant on the track, and it was clear that we'd really done what we needed to do.
The massive amount of training had another result as well. Due to the effort to improve his cycling and Little 500 team, Chris Gutowski moved up in the classification given to all cyclists who race for sport, becoming what is known as a Category 2 rider, a non-professional yet noteworthy ranking. Perennially afraid that stronger riders kept weaker riders away from the event, the Student Foundation introduced the Category 1-2 rider rule. Gutowski was now out of the race.
You know, they call it at different times, you know, the country's biggest intramural event or whatever. And an intramural to me means that if a person's full-time at a university and there's an event there that's called intramural, that they should be able to participate in that event. That's just the bottom line.
It was a tough pill to swallow, but it was also one more thing that motivated us to train that much harder.
Starting the race from the 5th position, the Delta Chis managed to stay up front and out of trouble for the first 50 laps.
I was on the bike and took a hard pull, and I thought I was just pulling the field, but I look back, this was not a planned event at that time, but I look back and I had a big gap. I go by our pits and Randy is giving me the hand signal to go for it.
The team built on the unplanned breakaway and took advantage of a number of wrecks by their competition to build a one-lap lead by 175. Brisman crossed the line alone for an easy victory.
Last year, when Delta Chi finished 10th in the Little 500, skeptics saw it as the end of a dynasty. Instead, it was only the end of an era.
Winning Little 500, by far the biggest cycling victory in my time. There may have been other races that I've been in that no, nothing even compares.
You know, I remember sitting there right after they won the race in '79, and having to watch that was really, really difficult.
Frustrated with not being able to race, Gutowski hired a lawyer and threatened the Student Foundation with legal action over the rule that kept him off the track. The rule was rescinded, and Gutowski was reinstated in time for the 1980 race.
They sort of made an exception for me, basically, and we had to settle for that. I mean, basically we won that battle and moved on, but it really never made anyone over there stop and think in general about the fairness overall of their system and their rules.
Bolstered by his addition to the team, Delta Chi was unbeatable as they dominated the race for the next 2 years. In the last race run in the 10th Street Stadium in 1980, the team destroyed the field, winning by 2 laps in record-setting time.
He had this legal victory, and then together we lapped the field twice in just a victory that was very sweet for all of us, but more sweet to Chris, I'm sure, than anyone.
He was so moved by that, the experience of having to not just train hard, but sort of having to fight the system. And he was so moved by winning the race that I truly believe it changed his life.
The adversity I went through in struggling to get back into the race motivated me even more, I think, to continue the tradition and to help others.
With each victory, both on and off the track, The team, and more importantly the fraternity, moved further outside the envious mainstream Greek culture.
We'd have people drive by our house, you know, giving us the finger. I think the SAEs came over and chopped up our sign with an axe one time. I mean, it never stopped. For my 4 years of riding, we couldn't entice a sorority house to pair with us. It must have been nice for the other bike teams to go, okay, great, you won, you know. We'll see you at our keg, because I'm certainly not going to yours. There's absolutely no reason to go over to your house to party.
In 1981, the team showed they could win in the new stadium as well, when Brisman again crossed the line first while setting yet another race record. Al Williams, Bill Brisman, and Doug Tate would graduate in 1981. Humbled by their 10th place finish in 1978, through hard work and passion for the race, they would become the most decorated trio in Little 500 history. Brisman, unbelievably, would take 3 checkered flags, each year crossing the line first without even having to sprint. In his biggest race challenge to date, Gutowski would return in 1982 for his final year of eligibility with a team of rookies. The nationally televised event would not disappoint CBS's audience. Starting from the 28th position, Delta Chi quickly moved up through the field and battled throughout the day with Kappa Sigma, their nemesis from the 1972 race, and a strong Phi Delta Theta team being led by Jim Mahaffey.
They come down out of turn number 4. White flag, 1 lap remaining. Here comes the sprint. Kappa Sigma comes into second place. Gutowski tries to stay in front. Over 30,000 standing, screaming. What a dramatic finish. Gutowski still in front by less than a bike length. Kappa Sigma stays second. Moving up is Phi Delta Theta.
That third turn, he's got it. He's coming out now, out of the 4th turn. Can he hold him off?
Down they come. And here comes Phi Delta Theta, side by side. What an incredible finish. Phi Delta Theta has won it. Let's take a look. 2 hours, 3 minutes, a new record by 2 seconds. And here are the finals.
I just remember them, you know, coming back to the fraternity after, you know, he lost the race by the width of a tire. And at that moment, I just remember thinking, you know, I could have helped. I could have maybe made the difference between, you know, winning and losing it.
Back home again in Indiana, and it seems that I can see the gleaming candle.
What I learned from my experience at IU and the bike race is that you embrace what you think is the greatest risk. If you feel like you should take a risk, you should do it, because in the end, you're always rewarded for it, either personally or socially. So that's what I learned from that, not to be fearful of taking risks. As far as the race as a whole, I feel as though I was at school at the right time to be a catalyst for women to explore their boundaries.
Then I long for my Indiana home.
The role of women throughout the history of the Little 500 has changed dramatically. From sewing jerseys and decorating pits to riding tricycles and racing for egg beaters, the weekend for women was never about athletics. While the tricycle race involved some training, the Mini 500 was always more about participation than sport, and despite its apparent effrontery to female students, it continued to draw large pools of teams attempting to qualify.
You mean you ride tricycles? And they said, yes. I said, don't you think that's demeaning? Well, they didn't quite get it. They didn't know what I was talking about. And I would see these pictures of women students, and, you know, I didn't even want to talk about what it looked like. Real condescending kind of stuff. I call it the difference between walking around the pool in a bathing suit or diving into the pool and being a real swimmer.
The events reflected society, and as women throughout the 50s and 60s struggled for equal rights, the Little 500 drew little criticism. The women on campus were content with their role in the weekend. This began to change in 1972. As it moved into its third decade, the Little 500, having survived the protests of the 60s, was ill-equipped to meet an entirely new set of challenges brought on by its next generation of participants. The Education Amendments of 1972 contained landmark legislation known as Title IX, stating that federally funded programs cannot discriminate on the basis of sex. The following year, several women utilizing Title IX stepped forward in a political effort to challenge the race by attempting to register for qualifications in the men's event.
The major reason for prohibiting female participation is not because the steering committee is prejudiced against women or that they are blatant sex racists. The steering committee is concerned about jeopardizing the entire Little 500 program. The race is too strenuous for women, and a change in policy would have made it necessary to allow men to participate in the mini tricycle and canoe races.